This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Baldwin. More emails, more problems for Donald Trump Jr. and the Russia investigation. CNN has exclusive new details about a message sent in the final stretch of the 2016 campaign offering access to hacked WikiLeaks documents. A previously undisclosed effort to reach Donald Trump himself, his son, and his inner circle just weeks before the election. This comes, of course, on top of other new evidence of follow-ups to the famous Trump Tower meeting between Don Jr. and a Russian lawyer. Follow-ups that he had promised when he had promised there weren't any. Let's get over to CNN's senior congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Manu, there's a lot that you have gotten in the past day plus. Lay out your new reporting today on this effort to give Trump access to WikiLeaks documents.
Well, Kate, this email on September 4th, 2016 was sent to Donald Trump, then candidate Donald Trump Jr., and others in the Trump organization, including Donald Trump Jr.'s personal secretary. And in this personal assistant, I should say, and in this email, it actually has a decryption code and a link to a web address where purportedly they could have received the hacked WikiLeaks documents. Included in this, it says that they could also receive the hacked Colin Powell emails, the former Secretary of State, whose own emails were hacked and were released 10 days later by a Russian front group. Now, the timeline is important here because on September 4th, that was months after the DNC was hacked and after their own emails became leaked. And it was a month before Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta's emails were leaked by WikiLeaks. And it was also a couple weeks before WikiLeaks was corresponding with Donald Trump Jr. on Twitter via direct messages. Now, the person who sent this email is someone by the name of Mike Erickson. We don't know who this individual is, and the congressional investigators themselves don't know who this person is either. But Mike Erickson sent this email to Donald Trump Jr. Saying that they could access these documents. And Donald Trump Jr. was asked about this, Kate, at the House Intelligence Committee's classified hearing earlier this week, and when he said he had no recollection of this email exchange. Now, the attorney for Donald Trump Jr. just put out a statement responding to our latest report, saying this: "We understand that the media reported 12 hours prior to this email that the DNC emails had been hacked or leaked. We do not know who Mike Erickson is. We have no idea who he is. We never responded to the email." But interestingly, Kate, on the same day that Donald Trump Jr. received this email was the first time that he appears to have tweeted about WikiLeaks. This is what he tweeted on that day, September 4th. WikiLeaks: Hillary Clinton sent thousands of classified cables marked C for confidential, including a link there to WikiLeaks. So Julian Assange himself has tweeted about our story, also saying it is not clear what this has to do with WikiLeaks. But I can tell you, Kate, this appears to follow a pattern of the way that WikiLeaks provides this kind of information, giving this decryption key and a website link. Whether this happened here, we don't know. And we also it doesn't appear that the Trump campaign or anybody contacted the FBI after they received this email. They said they just didn't act on it and didn't respond, Kate.
And to be clear, Don Jr. says he doesn't recall seeing this email.
Yeah, he doesn't recall seeing this email. And his lawyer said he took no action on it. So that's where we stand right now. That's what he testified under oath.
So separately, but I guess all connected, these previously unknown follow-up emails after the Trump Tower meeting, Manu.
Yeah, that's right. As you recall, that Trump Tower meeting, we were told by the White House and by Donald Trump Jr. was all about Russian adoptions. It veered off in this unusual subject about Russian adoptions. There were people in the room that even though Donald Trump Jr. initially was promised dirt on the Clinton campaign, that did not happen, according to Donald Trump Jr. But we have learned that Rob Goldstone, who's the British publicist who helped arrange that meeting, sent some follow-up emails after the meeting and also referred to a topic that was discussed at the meeting that we didn't know about before, which was setting up a social media page under the Russian Facebook of sorts, called the site called VK for Donald Trump, candidate Donald Trump, and that was sent to the senior White House aide Dan Scavino. So uncertain how the White House responded to that, or Dan Scavino responded to that, because we have not gotten a comment yet from the White House. They declined to comment on that report, Kate.
All right, Manu, thanks so much for laying it out. I really appreciate it. Joining me now to discuss what this could mean, Asha Rangappa. She's a CNN legal and national security analyst, former FBI special agent. Paul Callan is here, CNN legal analyst. James Galliano, CNN law enforcement analyst and former FBI supervisory special agent. Great to have you all here. So, Asha, this new reporting that Manu has gotten exclusive to CNN and also laid out perfectly there about an offering to Donald Trump Jr., to Donald Trump himself, to access to these WikiLeaks documents with a decryption key in the email. From an investigative standpoint, what does this email mean?
So, to make it easy to understand, this email would be as if someone contacted you and told you they had robbed a bank and gave you the location of the storage locker where they had stashed the money and gave you the combination for the lock on the door. So even if he never responded to that email, from an investigative standpoint, I would say, why didn't he call the FBI? This is knowledge of potential stolen goods or stolen information. It's knowledge of a crime that could have happened, hacking. And so I think even just standing alone, before we even get into any of the other things, and there's a lot that Manu mentioned, this is problematic.
Paul, from an investigative standpoint, that's where Asha's head goes first, right? From a legal sense, she kind of kicked us off there. From a legal sense, what do you think this means?
Well, it's a very interesting development, because if this was an attempt to give stolen emails, hacked emails to the Trump campaign, and the Trump campaign acted on it, you would have an argument that they were then in possession of stolen property, property they knew to be stolen.
Right.
Now, that can be a crime under federal law. It clearly can be a crime, by the way, under New York law, if that's where, in fact, Don Jr. Looked at the email, if, in fact, he did look at the email. So I think it's an important story, but we have to see how the puzzle gets put together. There's not enough there yet to say there's a criminal case, but there's enough information to clearly investigate carefully.
James, you're handed this piece of information in an investigation. What are your first questions?
I gotta respectfully agree to disagree with my two colleagues here. I'm looking at it from this perspective. Investigator sources of mine, the FBI, tell me that this is, in Shakespearean terms, a tempest in a teacup. Let's look at what we have thus far. We have Paul Manafort, an associate, pleading guilty to conspiracy to conduct shady business dealings. Okay. We have two folks, Papadopoulos, as well as General Michael Flynn, that pled guilty to Title 18 USC 1001, which is misleading, false statements, fictitious statements to an FBI agent. Those are, or those two specifically, are ancillary process crimes, meaning it's not indicative of an underlying scheme. In this instance involving Trump Jr., absolutely should have gone to the FBI. Absolutely. Is it tawdry, unseemly? Absolutely. But that's part of politics. And collusion is not a crime. And unless we can tie this back and say there was a reach back to these sources and a request to meet or request for more information or a request to conduct more, findings from WikiLeaks, I don't see the crime.
Well, if you have stolen property and you knowingly obtain it from the guy who stole it and you possess it,
that's the question,
that is a crime.
Right.
Yes.
But that's the question. That hasn't been established. It hasn't been established. He says he doesn't recall it. He says they didn't act on it. And he says that no one even tried to use said decryption key that is discussed in the email. Is that what this all hangs on? Does it matter if there's evidence does it require that there's evidence that the email was read, forwarded, passed along in some way, or acted upon, or just the mere fact that it's sitting in his inbox?
No, you would have to have evidence that he acted on it. And we're starting to see a little bit of circumstantial evidence. Now, we have the fact that for the first time he tweets about WikiLeaks. Yeah. We also have his prior history of mischaracterizing meetings. Remember that Trump Tower meeting originally said it was a big nothing. It was only about sanctions. And then we find out it was
three or four iterations later.
It was about a lot more. So I think there's a lot of information we don't have on this yet.
And it's not a good look when he can't remember the particulars.
Go ahead, Asha.
Well, I also just want to point out that this is a part of a larger pattern. This is multiple outreach to the Trump campaign, dangling potential information about their political opponent, a pattern of Russia and Russia-related contacts reaching out to the campaign. Now social media offers linked to Russia, which we know. And so it is true what James and Paul are saying, that these aren't necessarily smoking guns of criminality. But, Kate, let me just point out to you, these people had more contacts with Russian nationals and Russian-linked entities in 6 months than most Americans have in their entire lifetime. And yet they've insisted that this was ordinary course of business. They don't remember. And after all of this, it's really hard to understand how none of these things could have either raised a red flag, or they cannot remember and continue to lie, distort, omit, and, it just continues to come out.
Well, and when you're forced to, when you're in an investigation, and when you're forced to actually just admit things in a continuous string rather than say, we've got nothing to hide, this is all what happened, that's what is different here.
Absolutely.
But one thing, can I just ask you really quick, Asha, this Mike Erickson, that's the name of this person the name on the email that was sent here. The name is listed on the email. Congressional investigators are unsure who this person is. Our reach out, CNN's reach out, was not responded to. Don Jr.'s attorney in their statement says that they don't know who this person is at all. Is that essential here? Is that, I mean, I would assume that the FBI, when looking at this, I mean, that seems an essential piece of this puzzle.
Absolutely. So I think that the cyber investigators in the FBI will trace this back. I would say, Kate, there's going to be 3 different trails in this entire investigation, which has many threads. One is the money trail, which, as James pointed out, has come up in the Paul Manafort indictment, and we don't know where those trails might lead, if they lead to other people. There is a digital trail. This is malware, social media, these kinds of emails. How were they linked all together? And then I have to say there is the trail of tweets, because both Don Jr. and the president keep tweeting things that give information about what was going on behind the scenes and what was in their minds when these things were going on.
Well, and very coincidentally landing on key moments, or right ahead of key moments throughout the campaign when you're looking back. So there's a lot to this. And this is just one more part of this web. Asha, thank you so much. Paul, James, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tonight, a special report for all of you. CNN's Jim Sciutto investigates the downfall of Michael Flynn, from a military legend to the Russia investigation. The mystery of Michael Flynn, that airs tonight at 10 p.m. You don't want to miss that. And if there was any room left for any doubt in your mind about how President Trump feels about the Alabama Senate race, he just erased it with a single tweet, of course, about the embattled Republican candidate Roy Moore. And now he's headed down south tonight. What he tweeted today and what he may say when he gets on the stage. Coming up. Plus, wildfires have scorched over 140,000 acres now in California. New fires are burning. New evacuations are underway right now as President Trump. In case you had any doubt where the president stood on the Alabama Senate race, he just made it crystal clear in a tweet, of course, attacking Democrat his name is Doug Jones. Trump signed off the tweet with "Vote Roy Moore." And tonight, the president will be holding a rally just 25 miles from the Alabama border in Pensacola, Florida. Let's bring in right now CNN's Joe Johns at the White House. So, Joe, just yesterday, the White House said the allegations against Moore, they said once again, were extremely troubling. So what's going on now?
Well, going down to Pensacola, notably not going to Alabama, but it's still, the Mobile media market is 25 miles from Alabama, and the assumption is that the president is at least showing his face there just a few days before voters go to the polls, and he certainly is a big supporter of Roy Moore, so draw your own conclusions, but there's also a question here of plausible deniability, because Republicans say there could be quite a bit of blowback next year in the midterms when voters go to the polls, and it could affect the math, if you will, in the United States Senate. So the Republicans, the president, trying to have it both ways on this Roy Moore race, trying to get him into office and at the same time trying not to get too much of his fingerprints on them.
Yeah, it seems his strongest endorsement yet, though, of what he'd like to see Alabama voters do. So that's tonight, but the president's going down this weekend for the opening of a new civil rights museum in Mississippi. Congressman John Lewis, Congressman Benny Thompson, in hearing this, they announced that they're not going because the president is. The reaction from the White House after this has raised some eyebrows. What are they saying about this now?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'll just read it to you. The reaction says, "We think it's unfortunate that these members of Congress would not join the president in honoring the incredible sacrifice civil rights leaders made to right the injustices in our history. The president hopes others will join him in recognizing that the movement was about removing barriers and unifying Americans of all backgrounds." The interesting part of that, of course, is that John Lewis, certainly an icon of the civil rights movement, and Benny Thompson both saying they don't want to go because they don't think the president is a good fit with the memory, if you will, of the civil rights movement, Kate.
All right, Joe Johns, thanks so much. Joining me right now, Brian Lanza. He's a former Deputy Communications Director for President Trump's campaign. And Scott Muehlhauser is here, a Democratic strategist and former senior advisor to the Senate Finance Committee. Great to see you both. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So, Scott, I'll start with you. Pensacola tonight. Plausible deniability that the president's not going down there to stump for Roy Moore? I mean, I don't get it.
So it lets the president hit Alabama voters without hitting Alabama. 1 in 6 Alabamans are hit by that media market. It's very clearly a way to campaign for Roy Moore, but have the plausible deniability.
Why do you need plausible deniability if this morning you tweet out, vote Roy Moore?
Well, Joe made a good point. I think he's got an eye on 2018. He's got his eye on his own reelection. You know, whether he thinks Roy Moore is going to lose, whether he wants to, yet again, have it both ways, that's clearly what he's balancing right now.
But, Brian, I mean, what do you want to hear from Donald Trump tonight? I mean, you never know what's going to happen when Donald Trump gets on the stage for a big rally like this. But if he doesn't talk about Roy Moore, what does that say?
I mean, listen, he is all in for Roy Moore. He's put out his endorsement. He has the apparatus of the RNC behind him. So there's no plausible deniability in any of this stuff. Like, he is all in. And, you know, he planned this ahead of time before his endorsement. So people were very excited. I'm sure they didn't have an opportunity to, if they wanted to do another event in Alabama.
Laura Trump cut robocalls saying, I hope you guys can come on over and join us.
They're all in. They're not having it both ways. And this is what the president does, is when he gets behind somebody and he's made a determination that, as troubling as these allegations are, they still are allegations, but when you compare that to what a liberal in Alabama would mean to the U.S. Senate and to how his agenda moves forward, you know, he has to put focus on that. I mean, the American people voted for a specific type of change that they're getting with the president.
If you're back in your old job, are you happy he tweeted this out this morning? Because you've got these two messages that do not go together, which is, we find these allegations extremely troubling. We want to let Alabama voters decide for themselves. And then you've got the president saying, no, you vote for Roy Moore.
If I'm in my old job, I learned to adapt. I mean, that's the one thing I learned about working for President Trump during the campaign, is you never know what the next hour is going to bring. And so you just learn to adapt and you roll with the punches. Some good comes to some of these tweets. Some tweets, sometimes they make us a little bit uncomfortable, but overall they've had a positive effect.
Do you acknowledge that in some strange way that Roy Moore would be the best thing to happen to Democrats in 2018? Do you think that's true?
Look, let's start with the fact that sexual harassment has no place in our Congress. And I think what we've seen from Roy Moore is pretty despicable across the board. Is it a campaign wedge issue that Democrats could use? Yes. Would folks rather not have Roy Moore in the Senate, given his history? I think that's also true.
Let's play upside downside. We're going to call that a game today. Brian, first to you.
Here we go.
Upside. Another strong economic report. 228,000 jobs added in November. Unemployment remaining at a 17-year low. Downside, the president's approval rating in a new Pew survey is at 32%, matching what they say is the lowest that they've seen in any poll since he took office. 63% disapproval. These two things, great economic numbers and approval ratings, they don't often go in the opposite direction. What is going on here?
You know, you've had some distractions in the past year that have prevented the White House from talking about these economic numbers. The investigation has obviously been a huge distraction, and that sucks up a lot of oxygen so that you're not talking about the economy. You're not talking about unemployment in the Latino community being historic lows. You're not talking about, you know, a 20-year low of unemployment in the black community. Those things happen, but they'll get through it. They'll power through it. You know, 32%. You know, if that's what it is, that's what it is. But as he has more successes going on in the coming year, you'll see that number improve. And as you start to look at the November election for next year, it's Trump, who's going to be driving the agenda, who's going to be the main issue, but it's also Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. When the voters have to make a choice between those two agendas, we're pretty confident that they're going to choose.
But also, just ask James Carville, what often decides elections is the economy. Yeah. Do you think that was different now?
I think what you're seeing.
Hoping.
Well, of course they're hoping. But do you think that's do you? I mean, because if these are the numbers in 2018, good luck, Democrats. That's what Republicans would say.
Yeah, but these economic numbers aren't viewed in a vacuum. I think what you're seeing the economy continue to grow as it has for several years, but you're also seeing these sort of President Trump walk in, claim to drain the swamp, claim to do a host of things, and the first year has been a struggle in terms of real substantive accomplishments. And that first accomplishment, which appears to be the looming success of tax reform, I think folks see wage growth not going up and see the bulk of that going to corporations, and they're skeptical.
Final misstep on how they responded to John Lewis, saying they're disappointed that he's not going to join them in honoring civil rights leaders.
It's not the answer I would have sort of gone forward with, but it is a shame that John Lewis can't be there. I mean, I think it's a historic moment for our country. We come together during certain particular moments and put the differences aside, and this could have been that opportunity. And it is, I'm discouraged that he's not there. I hope he changes his mind, but I believe that the president welcomes it in any time.
Brian Lanza would have written the statement differently. We'll just leave it there. Great to see you guys. Thanks so much. Thanks. Coming up next, we do have breaking news coming out of Southern California, and unfortunately, it is not good news. Massive wildfires burning near Los Angeles and now San Diego, and there are new evacuations underway. Where the fires are right now, where they're spreading, and what the conditions look like, that's coming up. Following more breaking news right now, President Trump has declared a state of emergency in California. Fierce winds and dry conditions are fueling a half dozen wildfires now there. Nearly 200,000 people have already been forced to leave their homes. The images coming out, they're just devastating. Joining me now from Ventura, California, where the worst of the fires in the state is burning, is CNN's Stephanie Elam, who's been there watching all of this play out. Stephanie, what are you seeing where you are?
It's devastation once you get into these communities, Kate, and you see what these fires have done, basically just racing down the streets and taking out homes along the way. Here at this fire, the largest fire burning in the state right now, the Thomas Fire. Right now, I can tell you, we just got new numbers. 132,000 acres have been burned by this fire, and the containment is up, but only to 10% on this fire. That's why we are seeing this request from the governor for federal assistance and getting that response from President Trump to help out with these fires here, because this is just one of 6 that is still burning here in Southern California. We saw that fire yesterday in San Diego, 4,000 acres there as well, and also losing homes just as they are doing that here as well. The fires are continuing to grow, and that is the concern as the winds will pick up later in the day. That's part of the issue. The issue is containing these, and also if other fires start, and we're not looking for the winds to die down at all until perhaps tomorrow afternoon at some point. So still very much in the thick of it here in California, Kate.
Yeah, and the winds last night, they were whipping up last night, and it looks like you still got more to come. Great to see you, Stephanie. Thank you. Still ahead for us, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke firing back at reports that he used government helicopters to travel around the Washington area, calling the story complete garbage. Where'd he fly? What's the garbage? The details ahead. There's no other word for it. It has been an extraordinary week on Capitol Hill. 3 lawmakers in 3 days announcing they're resigning over sexual harassment claims. The latest resignation, Republican Congressman Trent Franks. He announced he's stepping down just as the House Ethics Committee had launched an investigation. 2 former female staffers accusing him of misconduct. Hours earlier, as you saw here on the show yesterday, Democratic Senator Al Franken called it quits in a defiant and unapologetic speech on the Senate floor. And Tuesday, the longest-serving member of the House, Democrat John Conyers, he resigned. He, like Franken, had been facing increasing, really unbelievable pressure from fellow Democrats as a growing list of former aides accused him of sexual harassment. CNN's national politics reporter MJ Lee is following all of this on Capitol Hill. What are they saying on this Friday after what has been an astonishing week?
Well, Kate, let's start with Trent Franks. The story is a bit of a doozy. He said in a long statement released last night that he and his wife have had fertility problems, and that thanks to a surrogate, they were able to have twins a couple of years ago. Now, they were interested in having a third child, and so they were looking into finding another surrogate. Now, as a part of that, Congressman Franks admits that he had conversations with at least 2 female subordinates about the issue of surrogacy, and that he may have been insensitive and may have made them uncomfortable. But as a part of the statement, Franks insisted that I have absolutely never physically intimidated, coerced, or had or attempted to have any sexual contact with any member of my congressional staff. Now, the House Ethics Committee is looking into Congressman Franks and whether he engaged in sexual harassment, and he actually said that this is a part of the reason why he decided to resign, because he believes that he cannot get a fair trial under the current circumstances. Now, House Speaker Paul Ryan is striking a different tone. He said that there were credible allegations against Congressman Franks, and that he said that they were serious and he wanted to take action, and he actually called on the congressman to resign last week. Now, one member of Congress that Paul Ryan is not calling on to resign, of course, is Congressman Blake Farenthold of Texas. He was accused of sexual harassment by a former staffer back in 2014, and remember that he settled with this woman, Lauren Green, and as a part of that settlement, she was paid $84,000 from a taxpayer fund, and this has raised a lot of questions about the system that is in place in Congress. And I just want to play some sound of what Lauren Green, the accuser, said about why she spoke out to Anderson Cooper recently.
I really just felt that I had to stand up for myself. I was told that, if I pursued with this, that my career on Capitol Hill would be over, and that was all I knew.
Now, if House Speaker Paul Ryan hasn't said that Congressman Farenthold should resign, one Republican Congresswoman has said that. She said this to you last night, Kate, on our air. This is Congresswoman Mia Love. She did say that she believes it is time for Congressman Farenthold to leave office. Kate?
Yeah. That's the question right now. Where's the standard? What's the different application when it comes to these various members of Congress right now with these questions against them? And it keeps coming. Great to see you, MJ. Thank you so much. Joining me right now, CNN political reporter Rebecca Berg, CNN senior political analyst Mark Preston, and Eliana Johnson, national political reporter for Politico. Great to see you guys. Rebecca, 3 members of Congress announcing their resignations in 3 days. What are you hearing from folks on the Hill about this?
Well, Kate, as Crystal Liza wrote for us on CNN.com, this is really the week that the Me Too movement arrived in Washington at full force. And you get the sense from talking to folks on Capitol Hill that people on the Hill recognize this. Lawmakers, party leaders, certainly, especially given that the conversation a few weeks ago was so different than the conversation we are having now. We were talking about the institution essentially protecting members who were accused of sexual assault, this opaque process for filing harassment claims, filing assault claims. Now you get the sense that we have shifted very rapidly to a zero tolerance sort of environment, and that goes for both sides of the aisle as well. You have a situation now where the status quo is not to protect members, but to out them, urge them to resign. There's no tolerance and no protection for members at this stage. Obviously, the beginning of a long process. There are reforms that are being proposed, and that will take some time, but a huge shift this week, no doubt about that.
And a big part of this is there's still more out there, Eliana. I mean, when MJ brought up Blake Farenthold, most Republicans have dodged the question about Republican Congressman Blake Farenthold. He settled a sexual harassment claim against him. MJ played that sound for $84,000. So she's on the record, on camera, talking about this. Congresswoman Mia Love, she took a stand last night. Listen to what she said.
I think that he should voluntarily resign because I believe we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And where he may not feel like his behavior was inappropriate, obviously somebody did. Obviously people felt uncomfortable.
She took a stand. Many others, most others have not. Why not when it comes to Blake Farenthold?
I have to say that it's a mystery to me why Speaker Ryan hasn't put pressure on Blake Farenthold to step down. The primary in that race is rapidly approaching. It's on Monday, and Blake Farenthold is essentially still in Congress, holds that seat because Paul Ryan has allowed him to do so. I think the mood on Capitol Hill is essentially members of both parties bracing themselves for more of these accusations coming and for more resignations. But the Democratic Party and Speaker Pelosi and then Leader Chuck Schumer in the Senate have really drawn a line in the sand, and I think seized the high ground here in order to, they've seized both the moral high ground and the political opportunity by forcing out John Conyers, who went out kicking and screaming, and then Al Franken, the same thing, clearly not a voluntary resignation, in order to put the pressure on Republicans and ramp up the heat, given that Blake Farenthold is still a sitting member of Congress and that Roy Moore is very likely to win a Senate seat on Tuesday.
Well, let's talk about that, Mark. I mean, this continues to put both parties in a really uncomfortable spot. I mean, I like to say, you know, too bad. But especially for Republicans, look no further than the Senate race going on in Alabama. President endorses Moore. That's of Monday. He tweets out this morning, vote for Moore. The RNC pulled the money out, pulled their money out, put their money back in. And a big question has been, why did the RNC jump back in this race? The chair finally answered that question to CNN yesterday. Listen to this.
Do you believe Roy Moore, or do you believe the women will come out of this?
Well, we've said all along that these allegations are incredibly disturbing, that if they were proven true, that the candidate would be unfit to serve an office. But it's up to the voters of Alabama right now. This is democracy.
So that's the RNC. But the senator that's in charge of the Senate campaign committee left no doubt where he stands on this, putting out the statement from Cory Gardner saying Roy Moore will never have the support of the senatorial committee. We will never endorse him. We won't support him, saying that to the Weekly Standard, and also saying, I won't let that happen. Nothing will change. I stand by my previous statement. I mean, wow. There's such a difference right now in how this is being applied.
Yeah, there's a big, there's certainly a schism right now in the Republican Party about how to address these type of allegations. You know, a couple things here. Cory, when he talks about referring to his previous statement, he spoke about expelling Roy Moore, Cory Gardner did, if he were to come to the United States Senate. I think that if Roy Moore does win next week, it is going to get very ugly very quick here in Washington. Not that it already isn't very ugly right now, but I do think you're going to have a situation where women senators, male senators, are going to find it very difficult to go to the United States Senate floor where Roy Moore is casting a vote. So I do think you'll see a problem there. We do talk about the dam being broken right now too, Kate. My question is, can the momentum keep up going into the holidays and into the new year? There's a chance that this movement, this reckoning that we're seeing right now, could kind of peter out because people are looking at the holidays. They're thinking about other things. Congress is no longer here in Washington. But I do think we'll see what happens there. But I do think there's one date that we should really focus on, and that is the anniversary of the Women's March that will occur like January 21st. That is very important because if this does peter out, that Women's March anniversary, if we all remember the images of last year, that could really reignite what we're seeing happening right now.
Well, and at this very same time, Rebecca, the president's going down to Pensacola for this rally tonight. Doesn't all of this hang over that rally?
Absolutely. And it's hanging over the race in Alabama. Doug Jones and his campaign are doing everything they can to try to keep the allegations against Roy Moore as part of the conversation going into the election next week. But on this split in the Republican Party, what is so fascinating is that it really is a split, as you know, you've seen so many times with this president and the Republican Party, between Donald Trump and the rest of the party. Because really on the Senate side, you're still seeing Senator John Thune, a member of leadership, came out this morning on CBS News and said, you know, he still would like to see an ethics committee investigation. He still opposes Roy Moore as a candidate. Mitch McConnell has mentioned still that he hopes to see an ethics committee investigation. You still have Cory Gardner in the National Republican Senatorial Committee opposing Roy Moore. So really, I mean, the RNC followed the president's lead on this, no doubt about it, but most Republicans still very uncomfortable with this candidacy.
And Eliana, I think we've mentioned in this segment, there are a few bills being kicked around on the Hill that want to address sexual harassment on the Hill specifically in the process of making claims. Has anyone gotten any indication that the president's interested in signing a bill like that if it came to his desk?
He certainly hasn't indicated that he thinks that this is a moment that he wants to capitalize on by signing a piece of legislation. That being said, as he prepares to go down and campaign essentially for Roy Moore today, I do think it will be tremendously difficult, and he may in fact be put in a position of having a veto overridden if he refused to sign a bill like this. In the end, I think this is the sort of legislation that he'd be likely to sign, even begrudgingly so, if legislation does make it to his desk.
Yeah. Harkens back to the Russia sanctions. How are those going right now? Great to see you guys. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Still ahead for us, the new reports coming out of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke and his use of helicopters on the taxpayer dime. This morning, he is fighting back. Following breaking news right now, according to a tweet from White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, the President of the United States has just signed the short-term spending bill to keep the government funded through Friday, December 22nd. Remember, today was the deadline for the government, that the government would shut down and would run out of money. That would be today. Congressional leaders in the White House, they came to a deal, and both the House and Senate passed that deal just yesterday. So they kicked the can to December 22nd, and no, that does not clear the way. The problems are still there, and they have a lot to work out. But so far, the government will not shut down today. We know that. Also for us, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, he is now fighting back against the reports that he booked government helicopters to travel between events in the Washington, D.C. area, trips that cost taxpayers thousands of dollars. His spokesperson, speaking out about these reports, calls the reporting complete garbage and yellow journalism at its worst. Let's get the details and the facts on this. Let's go to Washington right now. Renee Marsh is following all this. Renee, what's this all about?
That's right, Kate. So the Interior Secretary flying on a U.S. Park Police chopper on the surface may not sound like a big deal, but 2 helicopter rides are raising the question, is Ryan Zinke using U.S. Park Police choppers as his own personal taxi? According to his schedule, on June 21st, Zinke took a 35-minute flight from Washington, D.C. to West Virginia for an emergency management training exercise. His office says he had official business and a packed schedule, and he had to take that chopper ride in order to make the training exercise. Well, the prior business was the swearing in of Congressman Greg Gianforte. And then on July 7th, Zinke flew on a Park Police chopper from D.C. to Yorktown, Virginia, where he toured a park on horseback with VP Pence. All of this totaling $14,000 in tax dollars, according to Politico. However, as you said there, the spokeswoman for Interior pushing back, saying all of these helicopter rides involved official business. But the real question that's being raised is whether it was appropriate. Of course, he is under investigation, the Inspector General looking into all of his travel, and that's why this is raising questions. Kate.
Yeah, he's already under investigation for travel. Right. That doesn't even involve just within the Washington, D.C. area. Great to see you, Renee. Thank you.
Sure.
Coming up for us, we have new developments in the Russia investigation. CNN has exclusive new reporting about Donald Trump, his son, and an email sent in the final stretch of the 2016 campaign offering access to hacked WikiLeaks documents. What Donald Trump Jr. is saying about this. But first, voting is right now underway for the CNN Hero of the Year. I want to introduce you to one of this year's top 10 heroes.
People with disabilities, sometimes the world just passes them by. Having a workplace that makes you feel proud of yourself and gives you a sense of community is something we all want. Most of them are unemployed. We really felt like we wanted to do something about it. And it was like coffee shop.
Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to Biddy & Bowes. It's open.
Come on in. Other than our 2 managers, everybody that works at Biddy & Bowes Coffee has an intellectual or developmental disability.
Hey, how are you?
We figured out what their skill set was, and we plugged them in. Now we have 40 employees.
You made them feel welcome. That's awesome. Yeah.
For most of them who have never had a job before, it's really exciting.
Bonjour, monsieur. Matt's trying out his French.
We always say it's more than a cup of coffee. It's a human rights movement. It's given our employees the respect that they deserve. When you just give them a chance, they can do anything you ask them to do.
Vote for Amy or any of your favorite CNN heroes right now at cnnheroes.com. Be right back.